Hello everyone, this is Omercan and welcome back to PolyCosm. Today, we are going to continue working on our JELLYFIER concept by going over the 3D base Christina has modeled. As you can see, we have a few different angles to work with. This should help us establish the smaller details and lock down the design. Let's get started. Now that we have the overall design established, it's time to start thinking about the smaller shapes and the surface quality. I'm also going to spend more time thinking about the functionality of the weapon and figure out how all the parts fit together. This is also a good opportunity to focus on the roughly put together feel of the design. This is something I tried to invoke in the early sketches, and now I'm going to push it even further. I'm just adding these stickers, bandages, like cloth, cables, things like that wrapped around the weapon to really push the idea that this thing was haphazardly put together. This weapon is not something manufactured in a high-end factory, right? So I wanted to really look like that. I wanted to really look like it's being crafted by parts that the character found in their environment, and they crudely bolted this thing together. When Christina showed me the model, I realized certain parts of the design wasn't clear to her in the early sketches. I mean, obviously this is my fault, I'm not blaming her or anything like that. But this is normal. This kind of back and forth can happen within the pipeline. It is important to try and have all of your ideas clearly communicated in the early sketches as much as you can. But, there might be certain things that might get lost in the translation from 2D to 3D. So it's better to work on these oversights in the early phases of the process, rather than later on. Usually when I'm working on stuff like this, when I'm drawing, I tend to move my canvas around a lot. I rotate, I zoom in and out. But as I was recording this, I was quite aware of that, so I tried not to do it too much. I know if you are watching this, especially sped up, and I'm constantly rotating and moving the canvas, it might be a little bit nauseating to watch. So I try to limit that as much as I can. As always, I have my references open on another screen, and I'm constantly referring to them. I try my best not to copy things too much from the references, but instead use them as a rough guide to keep me on track, and I just let my imagination take over in parts. I feel this way I can create something that has more of a personality. It has more of my artistic vision in it. I know it sounds really pretentious to say that, but I don't like the idea of creating something that looks too sterile, something that looks too much like, you just found some references and copied them and pasted them together without really adding anything of your own in there. I don't really like doing that. So that's why it's very important for me to be able to put something of my own in there. As I'm working on this, you'll notice that I'm not sticking to working on one view of the JELLYFIER. but instead I jump from one to another. This is a more organic way of working for me, as it helps me to stay flexible in my approach to this design, and this way I don't have to commit to anything too much and I can just make changes as I'm progressing. One of the parts of the weapon that wasn't clear for Christina was the grip. She left that part unfinished in the model and asked me to draw it in more detail so she can visualize more clearly how it looks and how it's been put together. I'm establishing the details that were not visible previously on the other side of the weapon, and this way I'm clarifying those unresolved parts like the grip of the weapon and how the container that holds the jellyfish is attached to the weapon. This part of the process is just really fun for me. The initial sketching, at the beginning was fun as well, of course, but it can be also a little bit stressful. I tend to feel this pressure in that part of the process to be, constantly creative with each idea, and I find myself doubting and questioning every decision that I make. But once you have a design to work with, once you have something established, something to begin with, you can just really turn off all of that noise in your head and just really have fun with what you have. All you have to do at that stage is just brew some coffee, put some nice music on in the background and just draw. The reel attached at the bottom of the weapon also needed quite a bit of clarification. Since this is an integral part of the weapon, it's going to be interacted with by the character, the player, the actor, whoever. They will have to hold this reel and be actually able to reel the cable in. I wanted to spend a good amount of time on it to clarify how it's attached, how it functions, and all the other necessary details. As you can see, I left top view to last because this is my least favorite angle to work with. Nothing personal against it, it's just I find it not as exciting as the other angles. But of course, it's just as important, so I'm trying my best to spend as much time on it as I have on the other angles. I really like adding these subtle indications of texture. Making these marks that suggest scratches, dents, and chipped parts is really satisfying for me. A lot of the texture work is going to be done later on, but I think it really helps to put in some indications in this early phase. It really helps the design come to life just a little bit more. It's time for some close-up drawings. It's always a good idea to add these as much as you need them. Any part of your design that you don't feel is clear enough, you should address it with a quick sketch on the side. You can also use this as an opportunity to explain how a moving part operates as well. Here, I especially wanted to focus on demonstrating how the container is attached to the weapon. I noticed these heavy-duty bolts old school diver helmets have, and I really wanted to put one of these as a pressure valve to the side of the pipe. So in order to be able to remove this container from the weapon, you need to turn this valve and release the pressure. Now I'm sketching another drawing here to explain the trigger mechanism. This is a small detail, but it is essential to how the weapon operates. These kinds of small details can really help the believability of your design. The key is not to put in small details like this everywhere, but to use it sparingly. It's a common mistake that you see with beginner artists. They tend to put these kind of details in too early and they put in too much of it. You need to think of this like it's cooking a meal. You don't want to over-season it. You'd want to put in just the right amount of seasoning. For these extra drawings, I could ask Christina to render these angles out so I can draw over them, but that just adds an unnecessary step to the process. It's faster for me to sketch these on the fly. This is why a good understanding of drawing foundations is really important. You shouldn't always rely on having a 3D model to work with. I'm almost finished with this at this stage. I'm just paying extra attention to the surface details now. Just indicating beveled edges clearly, adding decals and things like that. I also want the final presentation to look as clean and as professional as possible. So I'm cleaning out my line work as I'm putting in these finishing touches. And here we are. Yeah, not bad. I'm quite happy with how this turned out. I think the added details and the changes really helped carry this concept to the next stage. I can't wait to see how all of this is going to get translated into the final 3D model. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, and I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure you subscribe for more content like this. We'll see you again next week for part 4. Take care, guys.